Hi. After years of benchmarking and blind tasting Australian Chardonnays, it's my fervent belief that Australia makes the greatest Chardonnays in the New World. And today, I've got 3 vintages of what is undoubtedly one of Australia's greatest Chardonnays, Giaconda. So let's dive in and have a look at what 17, 18 and 19 vintages of this great wine look like today. The Giaconda Chardonnay style is as revered in Australia as it is without, and perhaps the only thing stopping people from loving it is the fact that they may not know what it is, because while this wine is very cheap by world premium Chardonnay standards, it's circa $120 in Australia if you're buying it en primeur, this wine is really hard to get and often sells out before it's even released, and you're lucky to get a little bit for the cellar, and they grow beautifully over time. Stylistically, the wine seems to me to always be 50% hand, 50% vine. You get this gorgeous regional terroir character of Beechworth, but you also get these really strong, pronounced ferment characters. And that is what defines this wine and distinguishes it from all of its peers in Australia. But when we learn about the philosophies in the winery, that 50% hand, 50% vine can hardly be true, because the winery, so firstly we start with the yeast. So it's all wild yeast for fermentation and for malolactic fermentation. The wines are bottled unfined. The cellar and the winery are set up for gravity flow, so they're never really touched or pushed or anything like that. They're fermented in French oak and not 100% new as it might taste. It's 30% new, and it sits in there in that oak for about a year. So none of these things say to me as a reviewer that this is going to be a particularly made wine. In fact, I would look at those notes and say it's going to taste like the vineyard, it's going to maybe taste like the house, but it's going to be a land wine, and that's what I want. Now, when we consider that and we actually put it with the style of Giaconda, the two things make kind of a magic amalgamation, because for me, these wines are so complex and so full-bodied and so long, and that's the major thing, that it really begins to defy belief. Now, as Chardonnay drinkers and lovers, we all know what Australian Chardonnay looks like in comparison to, say, Burgundy, because we compare them all the time. That's how we learn, and that's how we get better. We get better, as in the winemakers get better at making better wine, but it's how we understand what's important in wine. And at the end of the day, it's always about the dirt. These wines have to taste like the places from which they came, because otherwise we would not drink them, we would not seek them out, we would not lust after them as we do. These are amazing wines. So enough about that. That's how we can define Giaconda. We know Beechworth. We know now a little bit about the way that the wines are made. But what we want to discuss here is how they taste. So 2019, 2018, 2017. The other thing I wanted to add is each of these wines has been met with unbelievable critical acclaim. But something that's very reassuring to me, I suppose, is if you placed me with these wines in a Faraday cage and I had no idea about what was going on in the outside world, and you said to me, how do they look? I would be blown away by these wines. And that's very reassuring as a drinker and a buyer, because they really do transcend all of the kind of fuss and hyperbole that's made about them. And they're just wonderful wines. So wine number 1, 2019, I looked at these in detail yesterday. It probably took me half an hour to look at the 3 wines, which is a really long time. Usually it's 5 to 8 minutes, but I just spent so long trying to unpick and understand them. So 2019 is the rambunctious wine in the lineup. It's the one that's really aromatic. There's this huge outlay of flavour, both aromatically and in the mouth. It's got all of the Giaconda characters. For me, there's like a camphor, singed eucalypt, bush smoke sort of character to these wines. Of course, it's the flinty reduction in the sulfides. That's what gives us those characters, but it's a very distinct expression that Giaconda gets. So this 19 really has that in spades. It's in the mouth that this wine is really kind of unctuous and saturating in its flavour profile. It's so good. There's crushed nuts, there's salted preserved lemon, there's peach, both yellow and white. It's ripe, but it's racy and it's tight. And it's so long. This is the thing. It's long. It just forges a path across the palate and keeps going. It's thrilling. It's a thrilling wine to drink. And it makes a very good case for drinking the wines young, because normally I think Chardonnay really starts to hit its straps at around the 4 to 5 year mark, which we're going to start to see here in the 2018, although a different beast. But the youth and the minerality and the line in this wine is just thrilling. So 19, awesome, love it, kind of rambunctious and outgoing. 2018 on the nose is really restrained. So I'm only getting kind of hints and glimpses of all of those little characters that I love so much with Giaconda. But in the mouth, it's a completely different story. So this kind of like explodes like a sonic boom, like it's the shards and shrapnel of flavour that kind of hits your cheeks and the back of your throat and it sticks in your mouth. This is so flavoursome, it's almost unbelievable. So where we have this balanced but loud outlay of perfume and flavour in the 19, in the 18 you have a very, very restrained aromatic profile and unbelievable power and density of fruit in the mouth. It almost billows. It still has that same racy type mineral acid line, and it's pure in its way, driven across the palate. Really exciting, quite salty, sort of crushed nuts, and again that preserved lemon character. It's thrilling. And this, after much thinking yesterday and toing and froing, this was my favourite by a squish. And then the 2017, so if this is rambunctious and this is a sonic boom, this is really patient and steady and powerful. It's got aromatics like the 19. There's a lot going on in the glass, and it really smells like Giaconda. You know, it delivers that campfire, embers, eucalypt character that I want so much. I often think hot Aussie bush, which sounds really inappropriate, but I'm thinking like when you go walking, for all of the local Australians, when you go walking through the bush in the middle of a hot summer day, if you've ever done that, everything is actually like the sunlight and the heat kind of makes everything aromatic, and you can hear crickets and there's all this stuff going on. It's really kind of sensorial and can pulse a bit because it's so hot. That smell that you get, that kind of fresh, dusty, eucalypt, bush kind of smell is what I get in this wine. And I get it here and I get it here in lesser degrees. But that is what I think of. So hot Aussie bush is not me being inappropriate. That is literally, I'm thinking of the bushwalking in the day. So the restraint here probably defines the 17 for me. It really forges a path across the palate. And you think that because it doesn't have this like pinwheel, Catherine wheel sort of like flavour coming out from all directions, you think perhaps it's not as good or it's inferior in some way, except that now when I'm talking to you, it still has the same amount of flavour in my mouth that I did when I drank it. And that's a very, very, very good sign. So these are stupendous wines. I mean, I can't overstate it. If you like this style of Chardonnay, which is to say it's flinty and it's a bit reductive and it's spicy, then these wines are absolutely top of the wazza. They are unbelievable. It's not possible for me to say too much about that. I love them. I critically love them. I personally love them. I emotionally love them. I physically love them. I want kind of them in my life all the time. You know, if I could just have this forever, that would be great. So if you haven't tried Giaconda, I'd really recommend that you do. For anyone that's not in Australia that has access to these wines, I'd snap them up if I could, because it's from this very, very little place in Victoria, and they're very, very special wines that will reward you now or in many, many years to come. In fact, I had a 2004 3 weeks ago, and it still had that same mineral tension and line. So, I mean, that's a 18-year-old wine. It's pretty impressive. Anyhow, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do. There's a lot of goodies coming up, great verticals and cool kind of comparative things, and some hot tips for cheap wines too, which we don't talk about too much. Cheers.